I saw my wife's bare foot, hanging off the gurney, before I saw her face. Blue limp toes, painted the same stupid coral color I bought her for our anniversary. And right next to her on the second stretcher, half naked and moaning in my trauma bay, was my brother-in-law. 2 bodies, 1 bed, 1 life mine detonated in under 30 seconds. My name is Michael Hayes. I'm 60 years old. I've been an ER doctor in Cleveland longer than some of my nurses have been alive, and I've watched people bleed out in the back of police cruisers without flinching. I thought there was no pain I hadn't already met and shaken hands with. That night proved me wrong. If you're watching this, if you're listening to an old man finally telling the truth, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story from. I want to know how far my revenge has traveled, and how many of you have ever wondered what you'd do if the people you loved tried to cash you out. Now let me take you back to the exact second my world split in two. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday. I remember, because I'd just checked the clock over Trauma 1, counting down how many hours I had left in a 12-hour shift that had already chewed me up. Bad flu season, short-staffed, 2 overdoses, 1 stroke, 1 teenager with a bullet in his thigh, arguing on FaceTime while I pulled metal out of him. Business as usual. The ER smelled like it always does at that time of night. Antiseptic, old coffee sweat and fear. Monitors beeping, wheels squeaking, somebody crying in curtain 5A drunk, singing off-key in the hallway. The orchestra of my life. I'd just finished resetting an old man's dislocated shoulder when the overhead crackled. Trauma code rolling in. 2 patients, Arif A. 3 minutes. My charge nurse Denise met my eyes. She's about my age, seen as much as I have. You good for 1 more, doc? Yeah, I said, grabbing fresh gloves. Let's dance. We moved like we'd done it 1,000 times, because we had. Denise assigned bays barked at the newer nurses to clear space called respiratory. I pulled on a fresh gown, tightened my mask. My back ached. My knees protested, but that's the price of staying alive past 50 in this line of work. The bay doors flew open with that hollow crash that still wakes me up some nights. 2 paramedics pushed in the first gurney. Middle-aged woman, chest compressions in progress. Lucas machine thumping her sternum up and down in an obscene mechanical rhythm. Someone had strapped a non-rebreather mask to her face, fogged with condensation. There was dried blood matting her hair on one side. Female mid-50s, the lead medic shouted over the beeps as they rolled her under the lights. Found unresponsive in bed. Possible cardiac arrest, head trauma from fall. Unknown downtime. We got a ROC twice, lost it twice. V-fib. 2 rounds EV1 amio. Last rhythm PEA. CPR in progress 10 minutes. BP tanking. I stepped into place at the head of the bed automatically, like muscle memory. All right. On my count, we're taking over. 1, 2, 3. We swapped out the medics for my team. Denise started calling out meds. The respiratory therapist adjusted the tube kit. A younger nurse fumbled with the defib pads. I didn't think. I just did. That's what you learn when you've lived this long on the edge. Thinking comes later, if at all. The second set of doors slammed open. Second patient, another medic called. Male, early 50s. Fall from standing, possible crush injury. Obvious deformity, left shoulder, pelvic instability. Hypotensive. GS 12, slurred speech, smells like booze. Found on the same bed. Bed. The words barely registered, floating past the roar of the monitors. Split 'em to trauma 1 and 2, I said. Laura. I caught myself. Denise, you run the second bay. I've got the code. We were in motion again. Scissors cut away the woman's TCC shirt and bra. Pale skin, exposed ribs showing a long crescent-shaped bruise blooming under her left breast. Someone taped down her rings so they wouldn't scratch. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the polish on her toes looked almost neon. Any allergy says medlist history. I barked eyes on the monitor. Unknown, the medic said. Neighbor called 911 for noise, then said it went quiet. We forced entry. Found them both half-dressed, lots of blood in the sheets. Took some time to get access. Half-dressed. Blood in the sheets. The words hit me like faint echoes from somewhere far away. On 3 we paused to check rhythm, I said. 1, 2, 3, stop. The chest stopped heaving. On the screen, a chaotic line flickered. V-fib. Shockable. Clear. Everyone clear. I waited, eyes sweeping hands, shoulders, making sure no one was touching her. Shock. Her body jerked hard against the mattress. I'd seen that jump 10,000 times. It never gets easier watching a body slam like that, and knowing you're the one doing it. From the corner of my eye, I saw the younger nurse, Maya, hesitate with the oxygen mask while we repositioned the tube. Doc, she said quietly, mask is slipping. Take it off. And hold her jaw up. Let me see the airway, I snapped, not looking at her face, just at the angle of the neck, the teeth, the tongue. She peeled the mask off. For a second, the whole room narrowed down to a mouth hanging slack and a pair of lips I had kissed more than I had kissed anyone in my entire life. Laura. Her name didn't sound like a name in my head. It sounded like a gunshot. Everything in me stuttered. I swear I felt my own heart miss a beat. The room didn't stop moving, though. Machines kept beeping. Denise kept shouting numbers. Someone was pushing another dose of epi into a vein. Maya was staring at me over the rails, eyes wide above her mask. Doc, she whispered. You okay? I must have hesitated half a second, maybe less. Long enough to understand what I was seeing. My wife, of 20 years, the woman who knew where every scar on my body was, lying on my table, with her hair crusted in dried blood and a bruise across her chest. Then 30 years of training kicked in and shoved the husband out of the way. Tube, I said, voice flat. We're not losing her on my watch. Cricoid pressure. Denise, get me another line. Charge to 200. We shock again as soon as we've got the airway secure. Later, people would say they'd never seen me calmer. I slid the laryngoscope into her mouth with hands that didn't belong to me. Vocal cords visualized past the tube, confirm with capnography. Listen for breath sounds. My brain ran the checklist while some other part of me screamed into a void. Behind me, through the curtain, I could hear the second trauma bay. Sir, can you tell me your name? Denise asked. A familiar voice, slurred, answered. Where's Laura? Where is she? What happened, Eric? I wanted to rip the curtain down, drag him off that bed, and finish whatever the fall had started. Instead, I taped the tube, checked the monitor, and shouted, Resume compressions. Charge, we're shocking again. We danced that dance for what felt like hours, and was probably 10 minutes. In and out of rhythms, 1 foot in life, 1 in death. Finally, by some small mercy or some cruel joke, her heart caught. A weak, thready sinus rhythm appeared on the monitor. We have a pulse, Maya said, almost it. BP is crap, but it's something. All right, I said. Get her on pressors, call ICU, tell them we're coming up hot. Head CT stat. She's not dying down here. As they got ready to wheel her out, Denise stepped back into my gloves, bloody to the wrists, hair stuck to her forehead. Trauma 2 is stable enough for CTC, she said. Pelvis is a mess. Shoulders out, but he's talking. Keeps asking for her. She paused. You don't have to see him if you don't want to. I can handle it. I didn't answer. I just walked out of trauma 1, behind my own wife's stretcher, following the bed I'd followed 100 times with strangers, only this time the woman on it shared my last name. In the hallway, The lights felt too bright. ICU nurses flooded around us taking report-checking drips. Just before they turned the corner, one of my techs jogged up to me, something small and metallic in her gloved hand. "Dr. Hayes," she said softly, "this was tangled in the sheet when we lifted her. Thought you might want it." My wife's wedding ring. Bent, the band warped the diamond claw, slightly twisted like someone had yanked it off in a hurry and it had fought back. I closed my fist around it so hard the edges dug into my palm through the glove. This wasn't just a medical emergency. This was the ugliest, cheapest kind of betrayal, and it had walked straight into my house, onto my turf under my lights. Back at the nurse's station, there was a stack of forms waiting for me. There always is. Medicine in America lives on signatures. I signed off on the code summary, the ICU transfer note, the trauma registry form. My name over and over again, in the same neat block letters I'd written on thousands of charts. Then the EMT run sheet caught my eye. Female found unresponsive, approximate age, 55. Male found on same bed, semi-conscious. Seen short-term rental townhome on West 35th. Neighbor reports loud thumping, yelling sound of glass breaking. Time of first unusual noise approximately 1:28 a.m. Time of 911 was called 1:50 a.m. 22 minutes. I've spent my whole life counting minutes, door to balloon time, stroke windows, golden hours. 22 minutes in a cardiac arrest is a lifetime. My thumb hovered over that one line. Delayed 911 call. Half-dressed. Blood-stained bed. A life insurance doctor brain does the math without you asking it to. I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck. This wasn't just an affair. It smelled like something else, something colder and uglier than sex in a rented bed. And for the first time that night, I realized I might not just be the husband who got cheated on. I might be the man someone had been planning to bury. People keep asking me the same damn question, Michael. How does a man like you end up here? Here standing in a hospital gown soaked with other people's blood, clutching my wife's mangled wedding ring, staring down into the kind of truth that turns a moss to stone. They think betrayal comes out of nowhere. No. Betrayal grows roots, quiet, deep, patient. And mine had been growing for years. Let me rewind just far enough so you understand why the blow landed so deep, why the knife twisted so hard. I wasn't born into medicine. I was born into noise. I grew up in a steelworker's house in Parma, Ohio. My father's lungs were full of dust by 40. My mother ran a cash register at a failing grocery store. We were honest people, broke, stubborn, loud, and the only rule drilled into me was simple. Be a man who shows up, even if it kills you. I carried that into everything. School, med school, my first marriage. God, my first marriage. Her name was Dana. Beautiful, brittle, 23 years old. When she married me, 26, when she was walking out the door. I wasn't a bad man. I was just a bad husband. Too many shifts, too many nights away, too many broken promises. She wanted a partner. I wanted to save the world, one dying person at a time. She got tired of watching me give the best of me to strangers. And when she left, she took all the softness in my life with her. For years I punished myself for that. So when I met Laura, I swore I would never make those mistakes again. I was 40. She was 36, an OR nurse, a widow with a teenage daughter. I met her during a long bowel resection. Surgeon was cursing, patient was bleeding, alarms going off, and she was calm, steady, unshakable. The kind of woman who walked into chaos and made the room breathe easier. She laughed at my terrible coffee. I memorized the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. Her daughter Megan was shy at first, but warmed up to me faster than I expected. I thought fate was giving me a second chance. By 43, I was remarried. By 45, I was living in a tidy 2-story colonial in the suburbs of Cleveland, white shutters, A maple tree in the yard, the whole American postcard dream. But dreams have weight. And mine got heavier every year. I paid for most of the house. Paid for Megan's braces. Paid for her college prep classes. Paid for vacations Laura said would help us reconnect. Paid for everything, because that's what my father taught me. Be the mouse who shows up. Then came the family net. That's what I call it now. Back then it felt like love. Laura's sister Jenna married a man named Eric, the same Eric I'd later find half naked in that blood-stained bed. But years earlier, he was just the guy who tossed me a beer at cookouts and called me brother. We spent weekends grilling steaks, watching Browns games, complaining about taxes, ordinary man stuff. He told me about his dream to open a small auto shop someday. So I helped him. Loaned him 10 grand. Didn't even write it down. Because that's what family does, right? Then there was Evelyn, my mother-in-law. Hard-chinned Southern Baptist, the kind of woman who could turn a compliment into a judgment. She'd pat my arm after dinner and say, "A real man takes care of his whole family, Michael. You're strong. You can handle more than most. You know Laura deserves security." Every time she said security, I felt the invisible rope tighten. So I picked up more shifts. Then more. Then overnight shifts. Then double shifts. Anything to be the man I was taught to be. The man who provides, protects, absorbs. You don't notice the drain while it's happening. Not until it's too late. By 50, my blood pressure was a slow-burning bomb. I lived on black coffee protein bars, and the faint hope that early retirement wasn't a delusion. Laura changed too. Gone was the OR nurse who thrived in chaos. She quit surgery, said she wanted something stable, moved to an administrative desk job. She talked constantly about financial planning, cutting back, making sure Megan had options, retiring to Florida before C60. And every time she talked about our future, I somehow felt less included in it. But marriage is inertia. You tell yourself it'll get better. It's just a phase. Everyone gets tired. Eventually, I stopped being her husband and became a foy, the infrastructure, the backbone, the one who held everything up so everyone else could rest. Looking back, I realized something cruel. They don't betray the weak man. They betray the strong one, the one who won't look up until the knife is already inside. The shift before the night. Everything broke. I had worked 20 hours in 48. My back hurt. My joints hurt. I'd taken 3 antacids and ignored 4 headaches. But I thought I was doing the right thing. The noble thing. I didn't know I was digging my own grave. Now fast forward with me. Back to the ICU. Back to the glass window, looking in on my unconscious wife. Back to the smell of antiseptic and the ghost of her perfume still clinging to my gloves. I stood there, wedding ring still in my fist, watching her lie under those harsh white lights, pale, intubated, sedated machines, doing the work her body wasn't sure it wanted to do anymore. Her monitors beeped in slow, uneven patterns. Her oxygen hissed softly. Her chest rose and fell in shallow waves. I should have felt grief. I felt nothing. Then I heard voices through the half-open ICU door. Not whispers. Hisses. Evelyn's voice, sharp, panicked, cracking under weight. "You idiot. Do you understand what you've done? If he finds out what you two were planning with that policy, we're all dead." My whole body froze. Policy. The word hit me like cold water dumped down my spine. Not affair. Not accident. Not guilt. Policy. A financial word. A legal word. A word that doesn't belong in a hospital room unless someone is talking about paperwork that changes the future. I stepped closer, pulse thudding in my ears. What policy? Who was you to? How long had this been in motion and why? After 20 years of marriage, was I just now realizing that I might not be the broken-hearted husband in this story? I might be the target. I've cracked open bodies on operating tables. I've drilled into skulls. I've cut clothing off strangers while their blood was still warm on my hands. But nothing ever made me shake the way I did the night I opened those 2 sealed patient property bags. After stabilizing Laura and signing off on Eric's trauma orders, I finally did what protocol demanded. I stepped off their direct care team. Conflict of interest, I said. My voice didn't break. My hands didn't tremble. I played the part of the composed, ethical physician. But God knows inside me was a storm ripping drywall off the walls. Even off the treatment teams, I couldn't leave the ER. I was still the attending for the whole damn floor until dawn. So I paced, reviewed labs, rechecked orders, pretended to be a machine while my marriage died somewhere inside the CT suite. Around 3 in the morning, the charge nurse, a young guy named Bellamy Sweet Kid, handed me 2 evidence bags. Dr. Hayes, these are their belongings. You'll need them to contact next of kin. He said the words carefully, too carefully. Everyone had heard the whispers by then. 2 half-dressed trauma victims. 1 bed, 1 doctor husband. I took the bags anyway. I walked them down the hall to the resident sleep room, shut the door, and locked it behind me. The room smelled of microwaved ramen and burnt coffee. There was a single metal chair, a humming vent, a dying bulb flickering in the ceiling like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive. I sat down. Eric's bag was on top. I told myself I should open Laura's first. I told myself it would be more professional. But something in me wanted to see the dishonor on his things before I touched hers. I unzipped the evidence bag. Eric's wallet spilled out, first a black leather one, the one I bought him for his birthday last year. I remember picking it out. I remember him clapping my shoulder and saying, "Brother, you always know what I like." My stomach tightened. There were business cards for his shop, Cole Auto Repair, a half-bent debit card, some cash, a receipt from a bar I'd never been to. Then I saw the key card, a midnight blue hotel-style key with the logo of a well-known extended stay chain that rented rooms by the hour or the week, popular among traveling workers and cheating adults. Then, an Airbnb printout, not an email, printed, folded twice, left in his pocket like a trophy. 2-night stay, Northeast Cleveland, quiet romantic loft, fireplace, private jacuzzi, booked under an alias. But the guest phone number was his. Next to it, inside a small Ziploc bag, 3 Viagra tablets unlabeled loose. A coldness climbed up my bow like a hand. I felt cheap, stupid, old. I took a breath that burned on the way in. I shouldn't have looked, but I wasn't done. Laura's bag sat untouched like a wound waiting to be opened. I stared at her name, Laura Hayes, written in marker across the plastic. For 20 years I'd spoken that name with softness. Tonight it felt like a blade. I opened it. First thing out, her iPhone, cracked at the corner. Locked screen. Wallpaper of us at Lake Erie last fall, smiling like idiots. Then her credit cards. One of them, my primary bank, was a secondary card under my account. She'd used it earlier that evening. I could see the faint smudge from the magnetic strip. Next, lipstick. A hair tie, soaked with something dark. A gold bracelet I bought her for our 15th anniversary. And then, a white business envelope. Thick, unsealed. From a national insurance carrier. Across the front, additional policy documents. Enclosed the insured party, Michael Hayes. Me. I felt something twist in my chest, slow and sour. My hands shook as I pulled the papers out. It wasn't 1 sheet. It wasn't even 3. It was a full contract. Life insurance policy, high value. Payout in the mid-6 figures. Primary beneficiary, Laura Hayes. Secondary beneficiary Eric Cole. My blood turned to ice. At the bottom, under signature of insured, was my name, Michael Hayes, written in a handwriting that looked almost right. Honest. But not mine. The H didn't hook the way I write it. The M leaned too far to the left. The curve of the S was wrong. I'd been forged. It hit me slow then, all at once, Laura, pushing me to sign refinance documents I never fully reviewed. Her insisting on handling paperwork so I could rest after shifts. Eric joking, "Man, you gotta protect your people. We all take risks in this life." Evelyn's sermons about masculinity and responsibility. All the sudden financial advice Laura said she got from a colleague. None of it was random. None of it was innocent. This wasn't just sex. Wasn't just loneliness. Wasn't just two people making a terrible mistake. There was money on the line. A plan. Paperwork. Signatures. Beneficiaries. A future that didn't have me in it. My chest tightened so badly, I had to grip the table to stay upright. And then Laura's phone buzzed. Just a single vibration. The screen lit up. Even locked iMessage previews display. Sender e-message. "Once this goes through, we're out. He'll be fine, just tired. You worry too much. Fine, tired. Once this goes through." The words didn't sound like lovers. They sounded like conspirators. And I realized then, in that tiny windowless room, filled with cheap fluorescent light, I hadn't just opened patient property bags. I'd opened the door to something engineered a betrayal with architecture, and I was never meant to live long enough to see it. By the time dawn bled across Cleveland, I had washed my face 3 times, but the man in the mirror still looked like someone who'd survived an explosion and hadn't realized he was missing half his life. Protocol didn't care about heartbreak. Protocol didn't care about betrayal. Protocol only cared about checkboxes. So I did the job. I filled out incident forms, signed off on trauma flow sheets, updated the overnight attending log, dictated notes with a voice so steady it scared me. But the whole time I was digging quietly, methodically, the way a seasoned ER doctor digs when something about a patient's story doesn't match the injuries on the table. I started with the EMT report. I'd skimmed it the night before. Now I read every line. Address: an Airbnb townhouse near Hopkins Airport. Incident type: unresponsive female, altered male. Scene description: blood on mattress, broken lamp, male, yelling for patient to wake up. Substance indicators: odor of alcohol, possible stimulant, or sedative presence, pending talk screen. Then the part that made my jaw lock: dispatch caller was a neighbor. Caller reports hearing loud crash at approximately 22 minutes before 911 call, placed by neighbor. 22 minutes. In my line of work, 22 minutes can be the difference between a life and a vegetable. I could picture it too clearly. Laura collapsed. Eric panicked. But instead of calling 911 immediately, they tried to move her, clean something up, delete something, fix the scene. God, what the hell happened in that townhouse? I closed the folder, feeling heat rising behind my eyes. Before I could spiral further, a knock came at the door. It was the responding police investigator, a wiry man in his 50s, named Detective Cole Renner, someone I'd seen around the hospital before on OD calls and domestic incidents. He stepped inside, shut the door, and lowered his voice. "Dr. Hayes, I'll keep this brief. We're trying to determine whether this was an accident or something else." "Something else," I repeated too softly. His eyes flicked to me, like he heard more behind my voice than I intended. "We're running toxicology on both your wife and your brother-in-law," he continued. "There are inconsistencies with the timeline." And the neighbor reported yelling. "We're looking at possible intoxication. Maybe a dispute. Maybe drugs." Drugs. I closed my eyes. I'd seen too many overdoses in my career Too many unconscious couples, too many tragedies soaked in substance. But this Laura, the woman who lectured me about drinking too much scotch on holidays, nothing was adding up. After the detective left, I walked the hallway toward ICU. The floor smelled of antiseptic and burnt coffee, the usual morning blend. Nurses began their shift change, whispering, glancing at me. I didn't blame them. I looked like a man with a ghost riding on his back. And then came Evelyn, my mother-in-law. Starched collar, hair sprayed into rigid perfection, a face carved from disappointment. She didn't say good morning. She didn't ask how Laura was doing. Instead, she stepped right into my path, hands on her hips. "This is your fault," she snapped. "I told Laura that your job would ruin your marriage. You care more about strangers than you ever cared about her." The words didn't even feel shocking, just predictable, like a script she'd rehearsed for years. I stared at her, silent. "You let her drift," she continued, voice rising. "A woman who's neglected will look for affection elsewhere. Don't act surprised." It took everything in me not to laugh at the cruelty of the moment, the irony that she of all people would defend the woman who had just been found half-dressed beside her sister's husband. But I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Every insult she fired became another nail in the coffin of who I used to be. When she stormed off into Laura's room, I felt something new resolve, quiet, sharp, metallic. I went next to the step-down unit, where Eric had been transferred. He looked awful pale, bruised left shoulder, in a stabilizer, pelvis bandaged. But he was awake. I opened the door. His eyes snapped to me, instantly wide and terrified, like a child caught stealing. Before I could say a word, he blurted, is she gonna make it? Not where's Megan? Not has my wife been called? Not how bad are my injuries? No, just Laura. His breathing hitched. She can't talk to the cops yet, right? They won't ask her questions while she's intubated. My pulse slowed to something cold and dangerous. He wasn't afraid for her life. He was afraid of what she might say. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I didn't answer, just watched him squirm. "Michael, man, I didn't mean this, wasn't supposed to," he stuttered, and then stopped, realizing too late what he'd admitted. A nurse poked her head in, saving him from my silence. I stepped out. The hallway felt colder than the room. As I walked toward the elevators, Detective Renner appeared again, almost as if he'd been waiting for me. "Dr. Hayes," he said quietly, "one more thing." I turned to him. He checked the hallway, then leaned in. "Did you know," he said carefully, "that there's a $3 million life insurance policy on you?" The floor tilted. "What?" I whispered. "It was activated 6 months ago. We're reviewing the paperwork. But your signature looks questionable. 3 million. 6 months ago. Signature forged." It felt like someone had shoved a fist through my chest. "When did you find this?" I asked, though my voice barely worked. "Last night," he replied. "Came in with the documents from the scene." He looked at me, like he was bracing for my reaction. "Dr. Hayes, if someone stood to gain that kind of money from your death, this investigation changes direction." My mouth was dry. My heartbeat slow and violent. 20 years of marriage. 20 years of trust. And I was worth more to someone dead than alive. When the detective walked away, I stood alone in the hallway, listening to the echo of his footsteps disappearing into the distance. Something inside me finally clicked into place. This wasn't betrayal. This wasn't infidelity. This wasn't a tragic mistake or drunken lapse. This was a plan. A coordinated, deliberate plan. And the only reason I was still breathing was because something in that townhouse went wrong. People romanticize the Hippocratic Oath. They picture it like some glowing scripture we recite with priest-day, hand over heart. But in the real world, in my world, it feels more like a set of chains. Heavy, binding, cold. I spent my entire adult life honoring that oath. Do no harm, be objective. Protect patient confidentiality. But no one warns you what happens when your own wife becomes the patient. No one teaches you how to reconcile the doctor's mind with the husband's heart. That morning, I stood at the ICU glass, like a man watching a movie of his own life, unable to reach into the screen. Inside, my wife alive, because I saved her. Outside, my sense of self dying because she betrayed me. And behind me, the nurses, the residents, the techs, all trying to look busy but stealing glances my way, quick, pitying, embarrassed for me. I could feel their whispers even if no one said the words aloud. Poor Dr. Hayes, she cheated on him. With his brother-in-law, he had to intubate her. God, I can't imagine the humiliation. I wasn't angry at them. They were human. And I was a spectacle, a walking tragedy in scrubs. Every look, every whisper pushed me deeper into a split. I didn't know how to heal Michael the physician, and Michael the husband, left bleeding on the inside. But one of those men had to lead. And anger, real anger, the old man bone-deep kind, has a strange way of sharpening your purpose. I made a decision. Right then, I wouldn't confront Laura. Not yet. Not emotionally. Not blindly. I would gather the truth until there was nowhere left for deceit to hide. So I went to work, not as a husband, but as an investigator wearing a white coat. I pulled aside a colleague I trusted, Grace Hensley, compliance officer, 40 years in the system, a woman who could quote hospital policy like scripture. Grace, I said quietly, I need clarity on boundaries. Family member as patient. My role. What I'm allowed to know, what I'm allowed to do. She gave me a long searching look. She'd clearly heard the rumors. Then she closed her office door. Michael, you can't access her chart beyond what's required for patient safety, she said. You can't interfere with her care plan. And you can't discuss her medical details unless she gives consent. I nodded. And if there's foul play, she inhaled sharply. That's a different matter entirely. Then you're not a husband or a doctor. You're a witness. A witness. The word sat heavy in my chest. Next, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my old college roommate, Jack Monroe, now a mid-level manager at a regional bank. Jack, I don't want anything illegal, I said. Just help me understand what I'm legally allowed to view as the primary account holder and co-owner of assets. He agreed. Within a few hours, he called back. Mike, you might want to sit down. I did. The house is in both your names. That's normal. But Laura took a 401k loan from your retirement account 3 months ago. What? My voice cracked. $38,000, he continued. The system shows an e-signature. My signature, I asked. No, he said gently. It's hers. Signed on your behalf. Forged. Again. And there's more, he said. Of course there was. Eric took out a business loan 6 months ago, secured by the equity in your house. I closed my eyes. Did Laura co-sign it? A long silence. Then, yes. My stomach hollowed out. They didn't just cheat. They didn't just lie. They leveraged my home, my retirement, my future. Together. That night, after the visiting hours crowd thinned and the halls quieted, I walked into Laura's ICU room. She was conscious barely, eyes half open, still intubated. A sedative drip keeping her calm but not fully under. Her gaze flicked toward me. Recognition, fear, shame. I pulled up the chair beside her. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I felt detached, clinical, like discussing a complex case I'd studied, not lived. Laura, I said, I'm going to tell you what I know. You can't talk, So you'll just listen. Her pupils widened. I listed the facts in order like puzzle pieces dropping into place. The Airbnb, near the airport. The delayed 911 call. The injuries that don't match a simple fall. The life insurance policy forged in my name. The withdrawals from my retirement. The loan taken out for Eric's shop, using our house. Each sentence made the heart monitor spike. Tears ran down her temples. She tried to shake her head, tried to mouth something around the tube. Then she tried to lift her hands to pull the tube out. The ventilator alarms shrieked. Nurses rushed in. Dr. Hayes, you need to step back. I stood, walked out, didn't look back. I delivered the truth like a scalpel, and she felt every cut. As the door shut behind me, someone grabbed my elbow. Evelyn. She yanked me into the dim hallway between ICU wings, somewhere visitors rarely went. Her lips trembled not with grief, but with calculation. She leaned close, whispering like we were co-conspirators. Whatever you think you know, Michael, you don't want to blow this family up at your age. I stared at her. She continued, voice low and venomous. Take whatever settlement Laura offers you later and walk away. Quietly. Not heal, not forgive, not protect my daughter. Just don't expose us. Don't make noise. Don't wreck the plan. That was the moment right then in that dim hallway that I realized something. This wasn't just a love affair. This wasn't just weakness or temptation. It was coordinated, calculated, a family project. I wasn't the husband they betrayed. I was the obstacle they needed removed. And they were almost done removing me. You learn somewhere past 50 that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet men, the ones who sit in corners, fix broken engines, and swallow whole storms without speaking, that know the most. And sometimes silence isn't wisdom. Sometimes it's fear wearing a cardigan. I realized I needed one person who understood Laura's family from the inside. Not Evelyn with her Bible and her poison. Not Eric with his smirk and his schemes. Not Jenna who bent whichever way the household winds blew. No, I needed Frank, my father-in-law. 78. Used to be a mechanic back when Cleveland still built things. A heart patched up by stints and medication. A man who rarely spoke, but when he did, it sounded like gravel mixed with regret. He'd always been kind to me, in small ways, quiet ways, offering me the last roll at Thanksgiving, saving me a seat at the Browns games, asking about my knees after shifts. But he never once challenged Evelyn, not once. Still, if anyone had seen the rot growing in that family, it was him. So that afternoon I found him alone in the hospital cafeteria, sitting hunched over a paper cup of black coffee, staring at nothing. He looked smaller than usual, older, as if the fluorescent lights had stolen some of the color from him. I sat down across from him. He blinked up at me. Mike. His voice was soft, roughened by age and heart meds. Frank, I said, can we talk? He nodded, folding his trembling hands together on the table. Those hands told me everything: scarred knuckles, grease-stained nails, that no amount of scrubbing could ever fully erase the slight shake of nerves and heart medication. I didn't dance around it, didn't sugarcoat, didn't spare him. He deserved the truth. Laura and Eric weren't just involved, I began quietly. They were planning things, together, financial things, dangerous things. His throat bobbed. I found a forged life insurance policy. Loans taken out under my name. Our house used as collateral. And I know about the Airbnb, the 22-minute delay before the 911 call. I exhaled slowly. And I know they didn't want me around anymore. Frank stared at his coffee like it might rearrange itself into answers. Frank, I said gently, did you know? The question hung between us like a weighted noose. He didn't answer. Not at first. The cafeteria hummed softly around us overhead, Vent's distant chatter, the clatter of dishes. A world continuing while his own cracked open. Finally, his shoulders sagged. I knew something, he said hoarsely. Not all of it. Not this. But something. How long? He swallowed. A while now. His fingers tightened around the coffee cup. I ain't blind, Mike. I know my daughter. I know how she gets when she wants something. And Eric, well, he's always been too sweet on her for a married man. He cleared his throat. Couple years back, I found messages. Him telling her things no brother-in-law should ever say. My stomach tightened. And you didn't confront them. He let out a shaky exhale. I did. I told Evelyn. And she told me to keep quiet. A bitter smile touched his lips. You know how your mother-in-law is. She said, don't stir the pot, Frank. Families get messy. Don't you dare ruin this household. I leaned back, letting the words sink like stones. She said Laura deserved happiness after losing her first husband, he continued. Said Eric was just being supportive. He rubbed his forehead ashamed. I'm sorry, Mike, I should have told you. But I didn't think it'd go this far. I didn't think they'd... His voice broke. God help us. I didn't think they'd try something like this. He reached into his coat pocket with an unsteady hand. What he pulled out was an old brown envelope, creased, worn at the edges, stuffed too thick for comfort. He slid it across the table toward me. I've been keeping copies, he whispered. Copies? I opened the flap and felt my breath hitch. Inside were documents, photocopies of loan applications, insurance drafts, bank forms, a half-completed divorce agreement, naming me as the party receiving nothing. Frank spoke as I scanned the pages. Evelyn made me go with her a few times to notarize things. Said it was just paperwork for Laura's future. But I didn't trust it. He looked at me with eyes full of exhaustion and guilt. So I made copies. Didn't tell no one. Just put 'em aside. In case. In case what I asked. In case someone needed proof. In case things got ugly. In case they turned on you the way they turned on me. I froze. Turned on you. He nodded slow and sad. You think they only plan to cash out on you, son. I ain't as stupid as they think. I got life insurance too. And your mother-in-law, she's been pushing policies, refinancing ideas, estate planning for months now. A cold chill crawled up my spine. I stared at the old man across from me, this gentle, quiet, broken creature who had held his silence through decades of family storms, and I realized something profound. He wasn't just my ally. He was another target. Another man worn down until he stopped fighting. Another man expected to die conveniently. Another man whose worth was measured in dollars instead of memories. We sat there, one man in his late 50s, one in his late 70s, bound by the same wound, the same betrayal, the same quiet rage. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, Frank pushed himself to stand slowly, gripping the table joints aching. He leaned down, voice shaking but sure. You're not the only one they were planning to cash out on, Mike. Then softer. We either stop them together or we both end up dead. People think revenge is heat boiling, reckless, loud, but the kind that saves your life at 60 years old, with everything you've built on the line, that kind is cold, measured, patient, the kind you plan. Because if the Johnson Cole family had been rehearsing a play where I was the fool, then it was time I built my own stage. And this time I was the one writing the script. Her name was Alexandra Pierce, though everyone called her Lexi. Mid-40s now, sharp eyes, divorce attorney with a spine made of tempered steel. I'd known her since she was a teenager. She used to babysit my daughter from my first marriage. Then she grew up, survived her own bitter divorce, and carved out a reputation in Ohio for being the woman wealthy men dreaded and betrayed women blessed. When I told her everything, she didn't gasp or cry out. She just leaned back, clicked her pen twice, and said, "All right, Dr. Hayes. If they've been writing a story about your funeral, then we need to write one hell of a plot twist." We got to work. She walked me through every step, every line, every legal minefield. What I was allowed to investigate, what I was allowed to collect, what could be used in court, what could get thrown out, what could send them to prison. She said something I'll never forget. Truth isn't enough. You need truth that's admissible. So we started building a fortress. The police had seized Eric's phone right after the accident, standard procedure in a suspected intoxication case. And because Eric was desperate to prove the fall was innocent, he signed consent for the officers to search his digital history. Bless his stupidity. Once law enforcement had the messages, Lexi worked with the detective to flag anything relevant to financial motive. And from there, the floodgates opened. Emails between Laura and Eric discussing timeline and coverage. Screenshots of Zillow estimates on my house equity. Drafts of a mutually peaceful separation agreement dated before the accident. Encrypted messages referencing my work hours, my insurance policy dates, and God help me, my health. Search history for delayed 911 liability. And the worst messages where they joked about me being too exhausted to notice anything. Every piece carved something out of me. But Lexi was laser-focused. She categorized everything. Bank statements, withdrawals, email logs, insurance correspondence, forged e-signatures, loan documentation. She built a timeline, the kind juries salivate over, the kind criminals pray never sees daylight. Detective Renner called me into a quiet conference room one afternoon. "Dr. Hayes," he said, "we're now formally investigating potential insurance fraud, forgery, and financializing." My throat tightened. "And possibly," he added, lowering his voice, "attempted homicide." I kept my breathing, even though the world tilted. He raised a hand. "But you do not confront them. Not yet. Not at home. Not in the hospital. Not anywhere. Let us finish our work." I nodded, even as every cell in my body screamed to drag the truth into the light. But wisdom comes with age. And I wasn't a boy with hot blood anymore. I was a man rebuilding the battlefield. Laura was scheduled for discharge in 3 days. Her condition was stable enough for Evelyn to finally reassert control. She cornered me in the hallway with her usual false piety. "We're having a small dinner to celebrate Laura's recovery. Just family. Pastor Green and a few close friends. You will attend, Michael. We need to show unity. The church is watching." She laid a hand on my arm, squeezing like a handler gripping a disobedient dog. "And for once," she whispered, "try not to overshadow everything with your work." I forced myself to nod, slow and apologetic. "You're right, Evelyn. I should have balanced life better." Her eyes gleamed with triumph. "Good. We'll show everyone we're still a strong family. Appearances matter. Appearances." She had no idea I was already building a new theater behind her. I wasn't going to that dinner alone. Lexi arranged for 2 friends of the family to join as quiet observers: a state insurance investigator, a uniformed police officer off duty, but with badge and credentials on hand. Both would blend into the crowd. Both would listen. Both would document everything. But the most important ally, Frank. For the first time in his life, the old man squared his shoulders, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "I ain't letting them do to you what they tried to do to me. You ain't facing that room by yourself, Mike." I felt something tighten in my throat, something like gratitude with a sharp edge. Together, we'd walk into the lion's den. The night arrived heavy with humidity and dread. Laura had been released that morning, pale but polished. Evelyn had done her makeup herself. Their house looked like a magazine spread. Crystal dishes, linen tablecloth, roses everywhere, hymns playing muffly, a roast large enough to feed a small village, a performance of holiness. I stepped into the living room first, Frank at my side. The room went silent for a moment, just long enough for the tension to be felt. Then the chatter resumed. But before anyone could greet me, my eyes landed on the coffee table. On top of it sat a neatly stacked set of papers bound with a gold clip. A divorce settlement, with my name on it. In bold letters, voluntary separation agreement, summary of assets allocation. I flipped the first page. I was to leave the house, take none of the savings, receive a humanitarian support stipend of $20,000. $20,000. 20 years of marriage. 1 year's worth of betrayal. Evelyn appeared at my side, smiling like a woman presenting a birthday cake. Michael, she said sweetly after dinner, we'll talk about these. It's time we all move on gracefully. Gracefully. I didn't show anger, didn't show fear. I simply lifted my head and met her eyes. Because she had no idea I'd brought witnesses. No idea I'd brought evidence. No idea that tonight wasn't a celebration. Tonight was the curtain rising on a play she didn't know I had written. And when it ended, none of them would leave the room the same. If hell has a foyer, it looks exactly like a suburban dining room, dressed for a celebration. Crystal glasses, a roast that no one will ever finish, and a family pretending God himself is seated at the head of the table. Evelyn called the room to prayer, eyes closed, hands raised, voice quivering with a Southern Baptist righteousness she wore like armor. Lord, thank you for restoring our Laura, for showing us the power of family, and for giving Michael the strength to accept what must be done. People murmured amen. Michael clenched his jaw. Not yet. Not yet. Tonight wasn't prayer. Tonight was reckoning. Laura sat at the far end, reclining against a stack of pillows Evelyn had propped behind her. Makeup masked the bruising. Lipstick covered the bite mark EMS noted on her tongue. She looked fragile, deliberately fragile. Beside her, hand resting a little too softly over hers, was Eric, the brother-in-law, the buddy. The man found half-dressed in blood-stained sheets with her. He wasn't even trying to hide anymore. Oh, he's just helping her sit upright, Evelyn said sweetly to one of the aunts, who stared too long. Eric's been such a blessing through all this. Michael scanned the table. Half the relatives looked uncomfortable, but complicit. The other half looked confused. And Pastor Green wore the benign, gentle expression of a man who'd counseled this family before. Evelyn tapped her spoon on the edge of her wine glass. Everyone quieted instantly. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began, hands folded like a queen addressing her court. As you know, our family has endured a terrible scare. Laura could have died. And Michael, she turned, eyes damp but cold. Well, he's worked so hard for so long. Too hard. A few sympathetic nods. Sometimes marriage runs its natural course, she continued. Sometimes people grow apart. It's nobody's fault. Michael felt Frank shift beside him. The old man's hands trembled. And because we want peace, we worked with a lawyer to prepare a separation agreement. Nothing dramatic, nothing painful. Her smile sharpened. Just a clean, humane transition. For everyone. She lifted the stack of papers on the table with a flourish. Michael will receive $50,000 to get back on his feet. And Laura will retain the house and majority of assets, as she is fragile and recovering. Michael heard a cousin whisper, 50,000? That's not much after 20 years. Evelyn shot the woman a look so sharp, she shut up mid-syllable. Michael, Evelyn said brightly, why don't you say a few words? I'm sure everyone would love to hear your heart. Her smugness filled the room like a gas leak. Michael rose slowly. His joints hurt. His chest felt hollow. He let the exhaustion show. It wasn't acting. "Thank you, Evelyn," he said quietly. "I do have a few things to say." He didn't start with love. He didn't start with betrayal. He started with math. Cold, legal, undeniable. "I've spent the past weeks reviewing our financial records," Michael began, voice steady. "And there are some numbers that didn't add up. Withdrawals from my retirement account, loans taken out in my name, insurance documents I never signed." People exchanged looks. "Tonight I'm not accusing anyone of anything," he continued. "I'm simply presenting facts." And he nodded to the side of the room. That was the cue. The insurance investigator rose first, a middle-aged black woman with a badge clipped discreetly inside her jacket. "Good evening," she said. "I'm here at Dr. Hayes's invitation. I've reviewed the policy issued 6 months ago." Evelyn stiffened. "There are significant irregularities," the investigator continued, "including forged signatures and undisclosed beneficiaries." All eyes shot to Laura and Eric. The blood drained from Laura's face. Eric swallowed hard. Evelyn slammed her palm on the table. "This is a setup, a performance. Michael, how dare you drag strangers into our home?" "I didn't drag strangers," Michael said softly. "Just the truth." Before Evelyn could retort, Frank stood. For the first time in 40 years of marriage, he raised his voice to his wife. "Evie, sit down." The shock in the room was nuclear. Frank's voice shook, but it was the unshakable kind of trembling, the kind built from years of swallowed guilt, finally forcing its way out. "I'm done keeping quiet. I saw you push those papers in front of me, saw what you needed notarized. I made copies." He reached into his coat. "All of it." He laid the envelope on the table. Evelyn's face contorted not with fear, with fury. "You traitor." "No," Frank whispered. "Just old and ashamed." Eric shot up from his chair. "You think you can ruin us, you son of a—" The off-duty police officer moved faster than Michael had expected, stepping forward. "Sit down, Mr. Cole." Eric froze. The officer continued. "At this time, we have substantial evidence suggesting insurance fraud, falsifying a police statement, and misuse of financial documents. You'll need to answer questions back at the station." A gasp rippled through the room. Laura pressed herself back against the pillows, trembling. Pastor Green whispered, "Lord have mercy." Michael was turning to walk away, to breathe, to stay alive inside his own skin, when he heard her whisper, "Mike." Her voice was papery frail, soaked in fear. "Mike, we never meant to kill you." Every conversation stopped. Forks clattered. A child whimpered. Laura's hand shook violently as she reached out, as though he might still take it. "We just needed—" She didn't get to finish. Because the moment she said "never meant to kill you," the officer moved toward Eric, metal cuffs in hand. And Evelyn finally seemed to understand that the play she directed had just burned the theater down around her. The last thing Michael saw as Eric was cuffed was Laura's face ashen wet, terrified not of losing her marriage, but of losing the plan. The plan he wasn't supposed to survive long enough to ruin. When the last squad car pulled away from that house, tires crunching over the gravel once shoveled in the summers, the world didn't explode. It didn't collapse. It didn't war. It just went quiet. A strange, hollow, quiet echoey, the kind a man hears inside his own chest after the adrenaline wears off. The Cleveland Gazette ran the story 2 days later. Local ER doctor narrowly escapes family-led insurance fraud plot. My name printed under the headline felt surreal, like it belonged to another man. A younger version of me. Someone who still believed the people sitting around his Sunday dinner table were harmless. My colleagues at the hospital kept their distance, kind, professional, careful. As if a wrong word might make me crack. I didn't crack. I simply walked into my department head's office and said, "John, I need a leave of absence." He didn't ask questions. Men our age can see when another man is trying not to drown. The weeks that followed were procedural, cold, exhausting. My lawyer, a sharp woman in her 50s with silver hair and a voice that never shook, took control of the legal battlefield like a general who'd been winning wars for decades. "Michael, you didn't cause this," she told me repeatedly, "but you will finish it with dignity." We drafted the divorce with every safeguard Ohio law allowed. I didn't want revenge in dollars, I wanted distance. My retirement accounts were restored where possible. My name was removed from every fraudulent loan. Eric's business debt was no longer tied to my home. The house in the suburbs, the place I once mowed every Saturday, was ordered to be sold, proceeds split by statute. And most important, I held zero financial responsibility for any criminal actions taken by Laura or Eric. When the judge read the final decree, I felt neither victory nor relief, just quiet. A quiet that rang louder than sirens. People asked if I wanted harsher charges, maximum sentencing, a public crucifixion. But when I pictured that outcome, I didn't see vengeance. I saw two little kids, Eric's daughters, packing clothes into trash bags for a temporary shelter. And I couldn't do that. Not at 60. Not after everything life had already taken from them. So I told the DA, do what's necessary. Nothing more. That was my revenge, measured human, the kind a tired old doctor could live with. I moved into a small rental near Lake Erie, a one-bedroom with thin walls and a view of the water, when the wind wasn't throwing snow at the windows. Nights were the hardest. I'd wake at 2 or 3 a.m., hands tingling, heart pounding, skin cold. My body still remembered the sensation of sliding a breathing tube into Laura's throat, the tiny click of cartilage giving way, the suction, the fog of her last breath on my gloves. I'd sit on the edge of the bed, palms pressed to my eyes, and whisper to the dark, "You were supposed to be home. You were supposed to be safe." But the dark never answered. So I went to therapy. The therapist was a Vietnam veteran, turned psychologist, 70s, soft voice, plaid shirts. He told me grief at 60 felt different than grief at 30, because you don't get as many do-overs. He suggested a support group for late-life divorce, something I once would have laughed at. But I went. The room was full of hair the color of snow, reading glasses, and stories that sounded painfully familiar. A retired firefighter whose wife drained their savings. A church organist whose husband disappeared with a co-worker half his age. A librarian who lost her house to a mortgage her spouse forged. We cried without shame. We laughed in the way only people who've been brought to their knees can laugh. That's where I met Ellen. She was 58, petite, with laugh lines that looked earned, not gifted. A former elementary school principal who lost her husband to pancreatic cancer 8 years earlier. We ended up sitting next to each other after meetings, sharing lukewarm coffee in styrofoam cups. She talked about her grandkids. I talked about my daughter from my first marriage. She teased me about my taste in 80s rock. I teased her about calling it my generation's loud music. We didn't flirt. We didn't force anything. We just sat. Two worn-out souls letting the world be quiet around them, healing in the smallest, softest way. It was a cold Thursday evening in March, wind howling off the lake. I'd made myself a bowl of soup and settled into the old recliner that came with the apartment, the kind of chair that sighed when you sat in it. I had a book open, something gentle, something old, but my eyes weren't following the lines. The laptop chimed. A new email. From a name I hadn't seen in months. Laura Hayes. My pulse stumbled. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. There was no apology. No explanation. No justification. Just one line. "Before my surgery next month, I'd like to see you once, if you can." That was it. A request floating in the dim light of a rental apartment, in the quiet life I was trying to rebuild. a ghost reaching back from the wreckage. A woman I once loved asking for something I didn't yet understand. Michael stares at the screen, heart heavy not with anger, but with the kind of fatigue only a lifetime of loss can teach. And he wonders, what could she possibly want? And do I have anything left to give her? I don't remember parking the car that day, or walking through the sliding doors of the rehab facility. Memory has a way of blurring moments you're not sure you want to keep. But I remember the hallway, long, white, smelling faintly of antiseptic and cheap hand lotion. And I remember thinking, so this is where all storms end, not with thunder, but with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs. It had been years since the night everything broke. Divorce finalized. Cases closed. Life rebuilt piece by patient piece. And yet when Laura emailed asking to see me before her surgery, something old stirred inside me. Not love, not anger. Something smaller. Something like closure setting its hand on my shoulder. So I went. Not for her. For the man I used to be. They'd placed her in a small private room with a narrow window facing a half-frozen courtyard. She looked thinner, hair wispy at the temples, skin loose at the jaw. Her eyes, once sharp enough to slice through excuse had dulled, though the habit of avoidance still flickered behind them. "Mike," she whispered. Her voice was weaker than I remembered, but the cadence was the same, the soft southern lilt she used whenever she wanted to seem fragile. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. Didn't move closer. Didn't offer my hand. "How have you been?" she asked, forcing a smile. "I'm all right," I said. "Working again. Teaching the younger residents." She swallowed. "Good. You were always, good at that." Silence settled between us. Not hostile, just heavy. The kind of silence you feel in your ribs. Finally, she spoke, staring at the blanket on her lap. "I owe you an apology," she said. "What I did, what we did, it hurt you. I know that." She took a slow breath. "But you have to understand, Mike. I was scared. Money was tight. You were working too much. I thought you were pulling away from me. I didn't know how to fix any of it. And Eric, I raised a hand gently. "Laura," I said, "don't do that. Do what? Rewrite the story so it hurts less." She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the old fire, defensive, embarrassed, cornered. "I'm not here to argue you," I continued, "or to blame you. We're too old for that. And we've lived too long." Her eyes softened. "Then why did you come?" I took a slow breath and spoke the words I'd carried for years. "Because I needed to tell you this directly. You took a lot from me. Years. Peace. Trust. The part of myself I gave you without hesitation." Her eyes glistened. "But you didn't take me. Not the man I am. Not the man I rebuilt. And not the years I still have left." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I forgave you," I said quietly. "Not to absolve you. Not to make you feel better. But so I wouldn't have to carry that weight anymore. Forgiveness wasn't for you, it was for me." She closed her eyes, shoulders sagging, as if something inside her finally broke. "I'm sorry, Mike," she whispered through her hands. "I'm so sorry." I nodded once. "I know." There was nothing else to say. My dignity, the thing I thought I'd lost that night in the ER, was right there standing with me at the foot of her bed. When I stepped back into the corridor, Frank was there. Thinner, leaning on a cane, face drawn, but somehow lighter, as if truth had finally unclenched its fists around him. He looked up and smiled a tired smile. "You doing all right, Mike?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I am." We didn't hug, didn't shake hands. Just two old men giving each other a single nod, one forged from regret, the other from acceptance. That nod was its own kind of peace. And now, here we are. Present day, Cleveland. A crisp Sunday morning that bites just enough to remind you you're still alive. I tug my jacket tighter, tuck my hands into Ellen's small, warm hands with the softness of a woman who's lived enough to choose gentleness on purpose. We walk across the grass toward the little league field where her grandson is warming up. He waves at us like we're the only two people on earth. Behind us, my phone buzzes every so often, texts from my residents asking about overnight case or from the hospital scheduler, reminding me about next week's lecture. Life steady and ordinary humming along. Ellen laughs as she tries to climb the bleachers, and I offer my arm. My knees aren't what they used to be, she says. None of us are, I reply, smiling. The world smells like hot coffee, cut grass, and second chances. I turn to you now, the listener, the reader, the one who stayed with me through every jagged chapter. Maybe you are 50 cc, 60 what the 80, 70. Maybe older. Maybe you think the time for starting over has passed. But hear me, really hear me. You are not easy. Your dignity is not done. Your chance at peace is not done. And you are absolutely old enough to walk away from anything that hurts you. You have survived too much to surrender now. Leaving a toxic marriage at 60 doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally stopped abandoning yourself. Life doesn't end when the heart breaks. Sometimes that's when life begins to tell the truth. As the kid on the field winds up and sends a baseball flying into the bright morning air, Ellen squeezes my hand, and I breathe in the moment. Not the past, not the loss just now. And I tell you as honestly as I can, that night in the ER didn't end my life. It ended the lie I was living. And at our age, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stop living a lie. Michael Hayes smiles soft, real, unforced, the sun glinting off the field behind him. A new life finally unmistakably underway.